The Prime Minister made no reference to any individual in his remarks yesterday. It was Keir Starmer who introduced the name of an individual. When the Prime Minister was asked about Brianna later on in PMQs, he paid a very, very warm tribute to Brianna and her family. What he was doing in the initial exchange, the contentious exchange, was talk about Labour's policy positions in about 10 different areas. He listed 10 different areas. He touched on this one as one of about 10. He didn't make any reference to any individuals at all. It was Keir Starmer who then introduced that at the end. And I think anyone who's in any doubt about this should just listen to the clip and form their own view.
But it's a bit rich, Mr. Speaker, to hear about promises from someone who's broken every single promise he was elected on. I mean, I think I counted almost 30 in the last year. Pensions, planning, peerages, public sector pay, tuition fees, childcare, second referendums, defining a woman. Although, in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn. The list goes on, but the theme is the same, Mr. Speaker. It's empty words, broken promises, and absolutely no plan.
Keir Starmer.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame, parading as a man of integrity when he's got absolutely no responsibility. Absolute.
And I think he was simply drawing attention to Keir Starmer's...
But in the light of the father's suggestion and apology, what would you say to the dad then, Minister? Because he thinks he's deserving of an apology, Minister.
Well, I was very, very saddened to read the comments, as I said. Someone, a Labour MP, later in PMQs, did ask the Prime Minister about Brianna specifically, and he paid a very, very warm tribute to Brianna.
May I take the opportunity to ask the Prime Minister if he will consider apologising to Brianna Ghey's mother for his insensitive comments? But turning to my question, the independent report into Teesworks, released last Monday, throws up more questions than it answers. And it's vital that we now have a National Audit Office investigation. The report was scathing and said there is insufficient transparency to offer evidence of value for money. Shouldn't the government lead by example, and will the Prime Minister finally release details of his conversations surrounding Teesworks, as he was asked to do twice last year?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the Honourable Lady was talking about the report in Teesworks, as far as I could see, and what that report noted was that the pace and scope of the regeneration had a wide-reaching positive impact on the local economy, and of course it was an independent external report. It makes it clear that there's no evidence of corruption or illegality, and the government will of course respond to the recommendations in the report as soon as possible.
He was talking about a series of flip-flops,
I know.
and he mentioned Keir Starmer's...
offended.
I've seen that, and he mentioned Keir Starmer's flip-flopping on the trans issues as one of many flip-flops. He didn't even come close to mentioning Brianna himself. It was Keir Starmer that introduced that.
Of course, Brianna was a girl. We know that Brianna's parents have been invited to meet the Prime Minister. When will that happen?
I don't know. I know that the Prime Minister would be very happy to do that, very keen to do that. I know that the Digital and Science Secretary wants to meet Brianna's mum to talk about issues to do with social media, which were relevant in this case. And I hope those meetings happen as soon as possible.
Yeah, the question we're asking is, once the Prime Minister has realised something that he has said has offended her family and has been considered disrespectful, why can't he just apologise for that specific thing?
Well, as I say, he was asked that question by a Labour MP about 10 minutes later on in PMQs. They made that point.
And he didn't apologise. Do you think politicians shouldn't apologise? Do you think it's a sign of weakness if they show an apology, rather than hearing what's being said, understanding that he's made a mistake, and actually saying, look, I'm sorry, that was not how that was intended?
No, I think apologies often are merited, and politicians and everyone, frankly, not politicians, journalists, everyone, business people, people in their day-to-day lives.
So if he'd apologised, would this have put all this to bed, wouldn't it?
Look, I think that you're just saying, make an apology just to sort of get through a media day.
I've made mistakes and had to apologise. I've wanted to apologise. You've made mistakes and wanted to apologise. Why is it so hard for him to apologise?
Well, he was talking very clearly about Keir Starmer's flip-flops and U-turns. It was very clearly. It was very clearly. And I can see that. I was very, very sad to read those comments yesterday evening. I think Rishi Sunak did later in PMQs go out of his way to pay very fulsome tribute to Brianna and her family. He didn't mention prior to that. He hadn't mentioned them at all. He was talking about Keir Starmer's policies. I think there is a wider point here for politicians, for journalists, for everybody to keep in mind that when there are very sensitive issues being discussed, to always use respectful and measured language.
I'm asking you if you think it was respectful.
I think he was talking about Labour's and Keir Starmer's flip-flops and U-turns.
Do you think it was respectful to talk about Keir Starmer's views on trans people at that time? Do you think it was respectful?
Well, he was talking about Labour's policy flip-flops, and that is a reasonable thing to do. The Prime Minister made no reference at all to any individual trans people. It was Keir Starmer who introduced that. The Prime Minister was making a point about Labour's very numerous flip-flops, another one of which we're seeing today, illustrating they've got no plan whatsoever.
Okay, the father of Brianna Ghey, Peter Spooner, has said that Rishi Sunak's remarks were degrading and absolutely dehumanising. He said, as the Prime Minister for our country, to come out with degrading comments like he did, regardless of them being in relation to discussions in Parliament, they are absolutely dehumanising. He went on to say identities of people should not be used in that manner. And I personally feel shocked by his comments and feel he should apologise for his remarks. Is Peter Spooner, the father of Brianna Ghey, going to get an apology from Rishi Sunak?
Well, I was very, very sad to read or to hear about those comments from Brianna's father yesterday when he made those. I think you need to also just view these things quite carefully and in quite a balanced way. And he paid a very warm tribute. But if you listen to what he said, what he actually said, he was talking about Keir Starmer's record. He made no reference to any individual at all, which I think was right. You don't want to personalise these things. He was talking about a whole series of policy U-turns, of which Keir Starmer's flip-flopping on the trans issue, and his was only one.
But you can appreciate how sensitive it is, though. How sensitive that is, particularly in light of the guest that was going to be in Parliament that day.
Yeah, look, I do understand the point, and that's why he made a very, very warm tribute a few minutes later when asked that question, not just to Brianna, but to her family for the campaigning as well. I think the Prime Minister may be saying more about this later on today, but I think, he was...
So do you think he might apologise later on today? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that, actually. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying he will, I think, say more about this. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough this morning. He'll be saying more about this later. But I think what he was doing yesterday was pointing out Labour's lack of plan and their flip-flopping in a whole range of different areas. And that is a reasonable thing to do. It wasn't personalised by the Prime Minister. It was Keir Starmer who introduced the name of an individual a bit later on. I think anyone who is interested in this issue should actually listen to the clip, listen to the initial exchange.
So are you saying Peter Spooner has misunderstood what Rishi Sunak has said?
Look, I've got every respect for, obviously, the views and feelings of a bereaved father.
Do you think he deserves an apology?
Look, I think if you people should listen to the clip, form their own view.
He has listened to the clip. I cannot imagine that the father of a child who was murdered a year ago this Sunday has not listened to that clip. And I think it's quite disingenuous for you to suggest he hasn't. He's asked for an apology. Do you think he'll get one?
Whoa. I did not for a second suggest that. I'm saying that people who want to form a view...
But my question to you was about whether Peter Spooner would get an apology, not about people listening to the clip.
OK. Look, I've already said repeatedly that the Prime Minister made no reference to any individual in his remarks yesterday.